Welcome to JMR Talks. Today we will discuss about leadership learnings from Maharashtra's episode. In the last couple of weeks, lot of changes took place in what we call Maharashtra. Eknath Shinde rebelled with his MLAs and formed the government. He has also what we call successfully earned the what we call trust vote. So let's see what is that we as a student of what we call management in general and as a student of what we call HR we could pick up from this Maharashtra's case. We all know that looking from the angle of organizational leadership, the principles of leadership are the same, be it for the what we call politics or be it for what we call the country or what we call sports or what we call business. The only difference is that the context could vary, requiring different what we call skills, varying skill sets to manage the economy. Now, for instance, look at Mike Birle or Paddy Upton, the great sports personalities. They have become excellent corporate coaches. Similarly, look at what Richard Oliver, the son of Laurence Oliver. He has used successfully Shakespearean plays for leadership development. Now, when we look at Uddhav's case, we find that he couldn't what I call manage three things well. Number one, leadership. Secondly, the conflict management, and third one what I call succession. Uddhav wanted the same respect that of his what I call his father, but the only thing is he failed to recast his strategy in terms of picking up the right people, outsourcing the what I call strategy to the right kind of people, mainly depending on based on what I call loyalty rather than the political acumen, etc. And the most important what I call disadvantage is that handicap for him was he was not accessible. In today's world, one has to be accessible, affordable, and what I call available as such. And secondly, many of the what I call children of the old Shiv Sainiks, they have become what I call techies. They are in the US and all that. So somehow he could not keep in touch with all these people, understand their concerns, their emotions, so that accordingly he could what I call rule the state. And most what I call important difference between Bala Sahib and Uddhav is that Bala Sahib never wanted to be what I call in power. He was a kingmaker, whereas Uddhav, for some reason known what I call best known to him, he himself wanted to what I call become a leader. Second, handling the conflict. So during the whole episode of Eknath Shinde's rebellion and what I call other MLAs and all that he was displaying what I call he was moving from one pendulum end of the pendulum to the other. Sometimes he was giving up. Sometimes he was fighting back. Now this failed to what I call enthuse his followers or inspire his followers to put up a what I call a better fight. So when we look at what I call his behavior, his conduct during the entire what I call episode, and ultimately Eknath Shinde becoming the what I call Chief Minister of Maharashtra, somehow I get a feeling that was he cut out for that? Was he aware that he doesn't what I call fit into the what I call this CM's post as such? Now this reminds me about Arnold Goslow's what I call famous quote. Maybe the trouble with the future is that it usually arrives before we are ready for it. But there are some people who are excellent in what I call observing, adopting, and what I call improve. In other words, they understand the context and accordingly what I call change himself. In other words, they change with what I call continuity. And look at what I call the succession part. He tried to what I call prop up his son what I call Aditya Thackeray. This probably what I call demotivated, dejected other senior people like Eknath Shinde, etc., etc. Maybe the time was not up for Aditya Thackeray to what I call present himself as the future CM candidate as such. And the third and the most important one is that one reason because of which he failed is incompatible alliances. In corporate sector, we talk of what I call culture compatibility. For instance, look at this Oriental Bank of Commerce with Global Trust Bank, the merger. Ultimately, what happened? Today, you hardly find any executive of Global Trust Bank with the Oriental Bank of Commerce as such. Now, he fought elections in alliance with what I call BJP. But when the BJP, refused to cede the CM's post, he joined hands with what I call NCP and the what I call Congress. It was a case of wrong alliance basically, with the purpose of, capturing power, thereby leaving Hindutva and what I call, discontinuing the legacy of, Balasaheb Thackeray. Secondly, even then, when he joined the what I call alliance, he failed to negotiate hard. On the other hand, look at what I call NCP and the Congress. They negotiated hard because they know that, alliance will not last long. So that's how, they ended up with the what I call meeting portfolios. And as I was mentioning, he was mostly inaccessible as such. He was not available to what I call Shiv Sainiks. He was not available to what I call, MLA such. So where could they go to get their, grievances redressed? I think that's how, probably, dissatisfaction to what I call, spread through the rank and file. Oh, is there something, which, Uddhav, could have learned from Naveen Patnaik and what I call Devendra Fadnavis? Look at what I call Naveen Patnaik, who got elected, recently for the 5th consecutive term as a what I call CM. Naveen Patnaik Sahab has come from a different universe. He was not what I call, he was, completely, alien to the what I call prevailing political atmosphere as such. But he didn't try to what I call, copy Viju Saab's style. He has what I call, developed his own style. On the other hand, look at what I call Ajit Premji. Midway, he has what I call come back from Stanford University. But, he adjusted what I call, himself. So when we look at, people like Naveen Patnaik or what I call Ajit Premji, we find that they found their own voice. In other words, they were willing to change with what I call continuity. Look at Devendra Fadnavis, the CM and the most successful leader who could get, what I call his nominees, elected during the Rajya Sabha and what I call MS election. Why did he compromise and accepted what I call Deputy Chief Minister post? Devendra Fadnavis, as the leader of, what I call BJP, he was more interested in the what I call long-term interest, because he knows that, facing Shiv Sena, NCP, Congress in the next elections will be a what I call tough job. On the other hand, an alliance of BJP with what I call Shiv Sena will be a natural alliance. So he didn't mind what I call, sacrificing his immediate what I call position with that of long-term what I call benefit for the organization. And one more significant thing about these people, be it Naveen Patnaik, be it what I call Devendra Fadnavis or Ajit Premji, is that they gathered right talent around them. In fact, Steve, was used to say that surround yourself with what I call smart people, and what I call, they manage everything. Uddhav Thackeray was mostly relying on what I call his family, his close family, and his what I call small coterie. And the main consideration for what I call him to pick up, this what I call team of advisors was more on what loyalty rather than the political acumen. Look at Kumar Mangalam Birla sir. Due to the premature demise of his father, he had to what I call take up the what I call CEO position, but he successfully took the company to the great heights. So one could say that because Balasaheb Thackeray had larger than life persona what I call stature, and what I call taking over him or carrying out the legacy from Balasaheb was a what I call big challenge, or maybe came as a what I call handicap. But one big mistake what he has done is that in case of what I call outsourcing the strategy, in picking up the choice of aides, probably instead of loyalty you should have gone for a what I call political acumen. You should have what I call negotiated hard. And the first and foremost what I call thing which he should not have done is that joining with what I call NCP and Congress. Both the parties were opposed to what I call Hindutva concept which Shiv Sena what I call stands for. So maybe what I call in the process what I call, he sent a message across that he formed an unholy alliance, an alliance with incompatible partners, which is what I call difficult to last for long. So thank you.